When the email arrived inviting me to give this talk, and I saw that it was from Hillsdale College, it was as though talk radio had come alive. I've been a huge listener to talk radio since the early days of Rush Limbaugh, and Hillsdale has done a wonderful job of getting its name out there in all sorts of quite respectable ways, and has probably proved, I think, to be one of the most savvy users of technology on the conservative side. So when I saw that the topic was technology itself, and it came from a place that I think has used it savvily and to everyone's benefit, I was a little crestfallen because I have a very dark view of technology. And I wanted to fill you with anxiety and dread about the future and even the present that you may not be aware of. But in deference to Hillsdale's proficiency at using technology for good, I decided to turn it down 20%. I'm really a novelist by trade and a storyteller at heart. And so this may sound like a technical and very high intellectual abstract topic. I'd like to tell it as a story. I'd like to tell you something about my relationship to technology and what I've learned about it as a journalist and as a writer, and where I think we are now. And I'd like to give a little hope for the future as the jaws of the giant beast close around us and we can still see a bit of daylight. Wandering around Hillsdale, I saw perhaps the best single quote on a bronze plaque today with which to start this speech. It was Winston Churchill who said, "Engines were made for men, not men for engines." And that was spoken in 1946 in Miami. I never knew he hung out in Miami, but I guess as soon as the lights came on in London, he got himself to a warm place to recoup. The truth is that though engines maybe were made for men, it is not any longer the case that we are in control. In fact, we're not. And I'm going to start with a tiny demonstration before I go into the storytelling mode. Look at this thing. How many of you carrying this around have thought twice about what you say to a loved one? How many of you using it have caught yourself making a text message or an email and thought, maybe I won't send that? How many of you have, late at night, maybe wondered if you should leave it on in the same room in which you're having a intimate conversation with a family member? Raise your hands. Anyone? Well, good. At least you're honest. Some of you. Because I'd warrant that most of you, if you have one, have had these thoughts. I know as a journalist, my practice has been deeply impacted by the fact that I have a spy in the room at all times when I have this phone. Not only a spy that listens, but one that can see me. You know, if you follow the fortunes of TikTok, the Chinese infiltration mechanism that is taking over the youth of America, you know that it actually triggers the camera, the front-facing camera in your phone, to gauge your reaction to certain stories. In other words, it can look at you after you have taken in some outrageous video of I don't know what, and I don't want to go into it now if you don't. And it will assess whether or not you're pleased, angry, enticed, whatever. That phone can do things that you don't want to know. It can measure your steps, as you know, but it can also ping your location at every point. I will give you an example. I met as a journalist not long ago with someone who wanted to meet me privately. And we decided to do it without our phones. We both took them out of our pockets and went to another place. But within an hour, and this is a little complicated to explain, within an hour, our social media revealed that we had been together. It made recommendations to us at the same time that came from a store that we'd been near. And it revealed, in fact, that we'd been followed the whole time. Our meeting was not confidential. So anybody who has this phone on them right now or carries it with them in the course of their daily lives is basically a prisoner with an ankle bracelet. But not an ankle bracelet that just alerts the police if you go outside a certain perimeter, but which listens, looks, analyzes, does physiological studies, relays location, keeps search histories, analyzes search histories for ideological themes, among others. Doesn't just market you to, Amazon or some other company that wants to sell you something. It markets you to political consultancies and to all sorts of shadowy organizations here and abroad that wish to influence, manipulate, record, track, even punish your behavior. We've all gotten used to it. I haven't heard a single person sort of exclaim in panic as I've listed these set of dire capabilities. You're all used to it. So am I. I brought it up with me. But it wasn't always this way. And I'm going to tell you the story of my sort of journey into this sort of heart of darkness and why I think we still have a chance to sort of escape a certain fate that I think is being planned for us. In 2014, I was hired by the Atlantic magazine to write about surveillance, a topic I knew very little about because those who surveil us don't publish their plans. It is the nature of spying on people that they not be aware of it. There are some reasons to keep us aware of it if they want to inhibit us or, sort of control our movements. You all know that in January 6th, many of the arrests were made using cell phone data location. If you were in Washington and you were in a certain perimeter of the Capitol and you had your cell phone on you, the FBI came to you. That's absolutely how it worked. But in general, they don't like you to know their capabilities, whether they're law enforcement or major corporations. So when I set out to do this story, I had very few leads. And I thought, how am I going to draw people into this surveillance issue when the people who are conducting it won't talk to me, when the companies that have perfected it keep it as a trade secret? So I thought, I will go down to this new building in Utah, the NSA Data Center, which is a building that had just gone up in the suburbs of Salt Lake City on the edge of a National Guard base. It was a big black box, no windows, with a perimeter of barbed wire and sort of phosphorus pink, scary lights. And I know that inside that thing, because I've done research, is every phone call I've ever made, every picture I've ever taken, every search history I've ever generated on any machine. My property is inside that locked government vault. And I'm going to go as close as I can to its perimeter and see what happens. Because at least I'll have a kind of Moby Dick style beginning for my story, trying to get into the big locked vault in which all of our data is stored. So I went with a veteran, a kind of intrepid kid who had gotten kicked out of the Navy for high-spirited behavior. And we dressed all in black, And we picked a night with a new moon. It was the middle of the winter, January. The snow was deep. We parked our car on a side street near Bluffdale, Utah, a kind of prefab new neighborhood which had been built for employees of the NSA Data Center. And at about 9:30 at night, in pitch black darkness, we set out through the snow to try to get to the thing and see what happened. Well, we walked and we walked. Those of you who have paranoid fantasies are going to be so delighted by what happens next. We walked and we walked through the snow, post-holing as they call it, you know, in snowy places, snow up to our hips, getting closer and closer to this phosphorescent, gleaming, dark monolith on the horizon. And the thing about the NSA Data Center that immediately strikes you when you approach it physically is that it's about the size of an average city's shopping mall. And in it are contained not just every digital record known to man that exists, but the capacity to store 30 more years of them. We're talking about every book, every letter, every photo, every movie, every conversation. All of it can be contained in a space that is smaller than a mall, 3/4 of that space being refrigeration and air conditioning technology to keep the servers cool. So it's as though the entire mind of mankind and the entire output of our brains really fits in something like this auditorium, finally. That is a humiliating vision of mankind's collective output. Not since medieval or Renaissance astronomers proved that indeed the universe and the solar system didn't go around the Earth. Have we had such a how can I put it, humiliating image of our own importance in the universe. The information age and the storage of information allows us to literally gaze upon the entirety of our whole project and, see it with one glance. It's in there somewhere. What tiny fraction of that was mine, I can't even imagine. What tiny fraction of it was my town's would have hardly showed up on a pencil point, I'm sure. And as we walked closer and closer to this thing, I got literally scared. I felt like I was some sort of epic adventurer coming upon a monster. It was a monster that didn't blink. It was a monster that couldn't see. It was a monster that had no humanity whatsoever. It was gleaming, and inside it was very, very cold to keep those servers from overheating. But it was as though I was approaching the black pit of hell. And my friend, who I was walking with, was having the same experience. We were having an intense emotional experience to a machine. As we got closer to it, the moon kind of came out a little bit and suddenly was blocked out by a dark craft. Now, anybody here who knows something of advanced military craft can probably name what it was, but we couldn't at the time. It was a silent, hovering, obvious, military aircraft that came out over the hillsides from the National Guard base and hovered over us as we stood about the distance I am from those doors to the fence of this thing. And it hovered over us silently. Its only signature being a tiny red bead, a red bead of light, like a cigarette ember almost. And then, after having spooked us for 3 or 4 minutes, it glided off. Now, that was worth the whole trip, to know that, indeed the black helicopters, the drones, whatever that may have been, are active and absolutely quiet and, deadly to our enemies. That was worth it.